Welcome back to the fifth installment of George's GLP-1 journey. I can't believe it's been 5 weeks since I did the first video. And what we do here is we take a dive into the importance of sleep. This is our subject for today, for seniors in general, but especially when you're on a GLP-1 medication. Why does sleep matter? What can we do to improve it? And what perhaps are some safe and evidence-based supplements or natural foods that we can look at while we're trying to enhance our sleep? So if you're new to this channel, I appreciate your support, and please consider subscribing and clicking on the notification bell so that you do not miss any of these weekly updates. Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit of myself. My name is George Logan. I'm married for 37 years. I have 3 adult children and 5 grandkids. And this is my 10th week on a GLP-1 medication, specifically tirzepatide, now titrated to 7.5 milligrams, which is produced and marketed by Eli Lilly, is Zepbound. And to this point, I have lost over 26 pounds since starting back in late July of this year. This GLP-1 medication, for those of you might not know, is for the treatment of the disease of obesity, which has been recognized as a disease by many medical associations, including the American Medical Association and also the WHO, and of course others. Now, I do have several comorbidities, including obstructive sleep apnea, hypertension, and high cholesterol, for which I've been treated now for many years. By way of background, I am a biological scientist with an advanced degree, but I'm not a doctor, and what I offer here is not to be considered as medical advice. For medical advice, please speak to your own doctor. What I hope to offer here and in future videos is my take based on many hours of research, including looking at some of the primary sources of what to expect from a GLP-1 medication, what is not only helpful but also necessary to arrive at a better place of health and vitality, especially for us seniors. So let's dive a little bit into my past week. Okay, so here we are, the familiar chart for some of you perhaps. Week 10, progress continues. And as you can see in this chart, I started at 256 pounds there in the upper left. And that was back in July. And I'm now at about 229.8 pounds, actually a bit less, which is a loss of 26.2 plus pounds. And that's happened in 70 days, which translates to about 2.6 pounds a week. And this past week, when I measured my weight a couple of days ago, I lost a total of 3 pounds, which is on the high side of what is to be expected. According to the clinical trials, typical averages of weight loss for this particular medication is between 0.5 and 2 pounds per week, but it can be more, especially in the beginning for those of us who are a little bit on the higher end of weight to lose. And so as you can see from the chart, there was an oops there about a month ago. And this is not unusual, as I've learned. You know, the first time it happened, I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Because I hadn't done anything different. I was following the program, so to speak. But that's not unusual, to have a few days where weight goes up and down, and even though nothing else seems to have changed. So what I've done this week in my little chart is to also show you what my caloric deficit is, indicated there by the green bars, which each one represents a day of tracking all my food intake. And yeah, at some point we might talk about food tracking. This is something I do. I know a lot of people don't like doing that. It works for me, perhaps may work for you. So I'll maybe talk about that in another video. Now the top line there above the green mass represents what I would need to eat calorie-wise to maintain my weight at 256 pounds, or what I am now. And that would be about 2,500 to 2,600 calories. Well, the bottom line there, where it says deficit scale 1,800, is pegged at 1,800 calories. And my calorie deficit is, my calorie budget, sorry, is about 2,000 calories. At least that's where I put it at this point. It could have been a little less. And that's about a deficit of 500 calories around there per day. And honestly, I never seem to have any trouble reaching 1,800 and maybe a little more than that. Sometimes I have to really work at it, but that's part of what the medication does in society. You have to work at your food intake in a good way. So I think about food a lot, but not the way I used to. I used to think about food all the time and want to snack all the time, and now the food noise is gone, and I'm actually thinking of food in a good way. Okay, what am I going to get for protein? What am I going to get for my fiber? What good superfoods I might taste? What little recipes I can put together? So as I've gone into detail in previous videos, for this to happen without side effects, that is the loss, and then of course without loss of muscle and lean mass, as I said, we need to retrain ourselves to eat better and eat wisely. And as I've said before, remember, food is medicine. Repeat after me, food is medicine. So that means prioritizing good lean protein and natural fiber, and of course to exercise regularly, including resistance training, as we talked about in the previous video. In my opinion, without these lifestyle changes, the full benefit of GLP-1 medications is greatly reduced. And honestly, for many of us, these meds do not come cheap. So why waste on the capital expenditure? So what I'll do in the next few slides, we'll review the benefits of sleep for everyone, especially for our seniors, and especially in us on GLP meds. This was by far the most fascinating and challenging research that I've done to date. And I will admit here that at the start, this topic is not only vast, but it's also vastly important. And I will just try to attempt to provide an overview with hopefully some important information to consider. Okay, so what does the body do while we're sleeping? Good question. This is very important to understand because, as it turns out, sleep is essential for health at any age, especially as for our seniors, as I will explain. And let me go as far as saying that without a proper duration and quality of sleep, any health benefit from weight loss associated with GLP-1 meds is muted, stunted, or even stopped. You might, like me, never have heard much about the benefit of sleep. I'll be the first one to admit it, for overall health. Even though, think about it, we spend close to a third of our lives sleeping, or at least trying to. Okay. All right. So as we can see in this slide, there's something called sleep architecture. So sleep is not uniform. It has repeating cycles with very different physiological roles and benefits. We have deep non-REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep, which is restorative, as we will see. And unfortunately, it declines with age. Well, REM, for rapid eye movement, is where we do all our dreaming, and it supports learning and emotional balance. And we should all think of REM as, and dreaming, of course, is what? Overnight therapy. That's what it is. Where we cross-link our new memories, the ones that we've had the previous day, we link them together, and even allow our brain to find some solutions and take that knowledge and produce maybe some wisdom. REM is like informational alchemy. Think about it that way. All right, so let me explain these slides. So sleep cycles. We have, it cycles, our sleep cycles through non-REM, and there's kind of 3 stages there. And then REM, and that happens 4 or 5, 6 times a night. And each stage has distinctive roles of what it does for us. N3, which is deep sleep, is for memory consolidation. and for growth hormone release. Now, that's very important. And then REM is for emotional processing, and it's where we get creativity comes from. Our ingenuity comes from REM. And of course, here the last little caption says that aging reduces deep, slow wave sleep more than it does REM. So I will show you next an example for my own sleep and my patterns of sleep a couple nights ago. So what do we see here? So this is something that my smartwatch does for me, and it's not perfect. It allows me to go to my phone, and it provides information, and that's good. It might be something you might want to consider. So the orange here, the bright orange, is wakefulness, at least according to my smartwatch. And the light blue, one down, and you can see the graph, and then you can see sort of the totals in the bottom. But the graph shows you you get into light sleep, which is the medium blue. Then as time goes by, you get into the deep blue, which is representing of deep sleep. And then it pops back up to the light blue, not the medium blue, but the light blue, which is REM. And you can see that that happens roughly 4 times to 6 times, and then roughly 6 hours and 50 minutes of recorded sleep here for me. And for us seniors, deep sleep is extremely important. And about 30 to 60 minutes is considered normal for us seniors. And as you can see, that more deep sleep happens in the first portion of again, you look at the deep blue on the left of this graph, and that happens in the first portion of the night, which is also quite normal. Okay. All right, so why does sleep matter, especially for our seniors? Well, according to the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Aging, they are connected. They have been connected to poor sleep. They've connected poor sleep to falls, yes, falls, cognition decline, and also immune issues. All right, so what it says here, older adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night for health and function. Okay, well, I've heard other sources that say the depending on the individual, 6.5 to 7.5 hours might be the sweet spot. But generally speaking, 7 to 8 hours is the norm. Short sleep is linked to higher obesity risk, poor cardiometabolic health, and multimorbidity in older adults. That's clear from the science. No one's going to argue that. And better sleep supports cognition, mood, immune function, and that's extremely important. I'll talk about that. And reduces, again, falls and accidents. I mean, you know, if you get 4 hours of sleep and then the next day you might be a little shaky, right? So at least for me, better sleep translates to more energy to do my job, which can be a little intensive. It needs energy because I am a certified soil scientist, among other things, so I dig holes through tough soil sometimes. It also allows me to support my family, right, and even play with my grandkids, so that's important. But let me linger for a moment on what happens when we sleep. Sleep, if you will, does something very important. What it does, it restocks the weaponry of your immune arsenal. Without good sleep, you're not supporting your immune system repair. So when we can wake up, we can fight off disease, even cancer cells. And sleep also regulates our blood sugar levels and controls our appetite hormones. Again, we'll know about that when we're GLP. It works hand in hand with our GLP-1 medications. Sleep regulates our sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone. It also fixates our memories from the day before. And here's something else it does, which is important, especially in our pressure cooker society. It de-escalates anxiety. It also flushes out harmful toxic proteins that can lead to dementia and Alzheimer's from our brain. So our brain flushes out every night. It repairs and also protects muscle and lean mass from being lost. And as I said a moment or so ago, and it's worth repeating, sleep, especially as we are in REM, is overnight therapy. All right, so here's the GLP context, if you will. And we have talked about this before. The clinical trials have shown that tirzepatide not only aids in weight loss, but also improves in obstructive sleep apnea, which I'm a sufferer of. And I hope someday I can toss my CPAP out the back window. Well, maybe not that bad, but you know what I mean. All right, so there is a 2024 New England Journal of Medicine that said exactly that tirzepatide reduces apnea and hypopnea index, or AHI, the hypoxic burden, NHS, CRP, and blood pressure in adults with OCA and obesity. And this HS, CPR, CRP, I want to call it CPR, is really a test to assess cardiovascular risk. It looks at levels of a high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and that's a protein reduced by our livers in response to inflammation. And inflammation is not good, and maybe we'll talk about that at some point. And okay, so GI side effects could be nausea, reflux, it could disrupt sleep, and optimized dosing time is important. And what we mean by that is that when we take our GLP shot, because it does potentially can have GI side effects, we need to maybe think about our dosing time. And also when it relates to sleep, meal timing, and also sleep posture. Okay, so recommended duration, we talked about this, aimed for 7 to 8 hours for us that are 65 plus, which is similar to younger adults according to the National Science Foundation consensus and the National Institute for Aging. We might want to shift our timing earlier, and sleep can become lighter and more fragmented, and we have to plan our routines accordingly as to when we go to sleep. And as I will talk about later, regularity of sleep, going to sleep and getting out of sleep is extremely important. So our one recommendation is, again, to keep your time going to bed and the time getting up pretty much the same every night. So what are some consequences for insufficient sleep? So there was a study, again, that's the Public Library of Science, the PLOS medicine cohort. They looked at, I think it was over 10,000 individuals over 25 years, and they were able to show that if you sleep less 5 hours per night for ages between 50 and 70, it's linked to increased risk of multiple chronic diseases, and the list is pretty long. And sleep curtailment alters appetite hormones and weight regulation, as we talked about above, working against obesity treatment. And this is from this cohort studies. So here's some sleep hygiene tailored comments for GLP-1 users. So finish. One of the recommendations that I think I've seen in myself is to finish your larger meals 3 to 4 hours before bed, and avoid heavy fatty foods late to reduce reflux and nausea. So what I've been trying to do, it works most of the time, is if I'm sleeping between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, which is the usual time I go to bed, is by 8 o'clock I'm done eating. And I make sure that my last meal is not very carb heavy, very fat heavy, and then it's basically a lighter meal. Yes, protein is something that I go after. The time. So this has to do with GLP and when we take our dose. Time weekly, dose earlier in the day. If nighttime nausea is disruptive, confirm with your clinician is a recommendation. So I typically take my shot, my fat stab, if you will, Friday afternoons. And that doesn't seem to have caused any problems as far as sleep, but I'm considering possibly taking a little earlier, just to be sure. The limit, again, consistent schedule, morning, daylight, and daytime activity, limit late caffeine, alcohol, and a cool and dark room. Well, I'm going to talk about these in a moment, but the idea is consistent schedule of sleep, start and finish. You need to get out into daylight because that resets your circadian rhythms. To have some daytime activity, again, exercise, and limit caffeine and alcohol. I will talk about that in a minute. But again, to reiterate, the brain expects regularity when it comes to sleep. So here's some other tips. So start dimming lights for an hour or more before bedtime. That will be an hour for me, so I might have to dim a light or two. And then get the temperatures in your room down to between 65 and 68 degrees. That's something that, again, science has shown. Your body has to reduce its temperature to allow you to sleep. That's what your body does. So you help it that way. And I've noticed that if I get a little hot in the middle of the night, I'll wake up. Sometimes I'm sweating for whatever reason. So keeping the room for us between 65 and 67 seems to do the trick. And make sure that you do not have any blue light wavelengths emitting after dark, especially screens. The lights that I have right now are not blue light emitting, since I'm going to be going to bed after I do this video. Especially from screens and smartphones and smart TVs, because it delays the release of melatonin, which melatonin is basically very important to get you into the onset of sleeping. And that's been shown by science very clearly. And limit alcohol and caffeine. What alcohol does, and a lot of people think alcohol is like a sedative. We all know that. So we think that if we have a little alcohol that it will help us to go to sleep, but it does the actual opposite. Alcohol fragments your sleep, and it's not your friend. It disrupts your sleep. It doesn't let you to get into deep sleep, especially. And here's a novel one. Crack your window to allow fresh air to circulate and keep carbon dioxide levels down. Some studies have started showing that if you have, because as you know, as you sleep, especially if you have your wife next to you or your partner, what happens is you start emitting dioxide through the night, and it can accumulate, especially if your bedroom is relatively small. If it's 20 by 20, maybe not so much. But I did a little measuring myself yesterday, and I have a little CO2 meter, and it started about 400 to 600 parts per trillion, and it went up to over 1,000, 1,100 to 1,200, which is not considered good. So guess what we're doing tonight? We're cracking the window so we can keep that carbon dioxide down. And that's kind of what... And by the way, when you get up in the morning, get out to natural light within 10 minutes. Because what that does, it resets your circadian rhythms, which is your biological internal clock. So it resets everything again for the day. Okay, so yeah, there are a number of things out there that... either do help us or supposed to help us in sleep. And I'm not talking about medication specifically for like sedatives. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about things you can go buy at the Walmart or, Walgreens. And there are some that are safe and they're evidence-based, especially for our seniors. Melatonin is one, and you can have immediate one, and you can have sort of a slow release or SR1, controlled release. I do take melatonin. I'm actually trying to wean myself away from it a little bit because apparently I'm taking too much of a high dose, 5 milligrams. So the recommended dosage is to start low. Start at no more than 1 milligram, 1 or 2 hours before bed. And many do well at 1 to 3 milligrams. And again, using slow release, 2 milligrams for sleep maintenance seems to be good, because what it does, it doesn't necessarily help you to sleep long, but it helps you to get to sleep. And one of the things we know is as we age, we don't produce as much melatonin. So that's the issue. So I've been using melatonin for a while, but again, I've been a little convicted as I've looked at the studies that I need to kind of cut down on it and maybe experiment with lower doses to see how that helps me or not. Um, and as far as safety, it can cause morning grogginess, especially at higher doses, and it can have potential interactions, and so that's why you need to talk to your doctor for that. Another one, which again is based on a whole bunch of studies, and these are clinical randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, and there's some evidence, including for elderly, that show improvements in insulin sensitivity index, and the higher the better, obviously, and low ISI translates to insulin's resistance, which is not something we want. And it's something we probably, if we're obese and we're suffering from the disease of obesity, we probably have some insulin resistance. And maybe that's a topic for another future video. Dose, 200 to 400 milligrams of elemental at night. Glycinate seems to be the one that the studies show is much gentler to our GI. And it's important given GLP-1 related GI symptoms. So you got to be a little careful and maybe dose it. And avoid magnesium oxide, which is really a laxative. And discuss all these things with your clinician. Obviously, that's very, very important. Okay, so glycine. Again, there's some evidence that has been put out there, and I've been reading some of it. More evidence is probably on its way because this is being studied more. And it shows that there have been some human evidence studies that glycine can moderately improve sleep. And as I said, research is ongoing, including some randomized trials. 3 grams, 30 to 60 minutes pre-bed improved subjective and objective sleep quality and next day performance in these small RCTs. And it's generally well tolerated with mild GI effects possible. I am taking some glycine at night and I have not yet noticed any interactions. At least I don't think I have. And if there's some, probably I'm putting them to being sort of the general sort of GI disturbances that do not amount to much that maybe GLP-1s do. Or maybe I'm eating too much at night. So there you go. Tart cherry. This is not something that I've tried yet. Again, there's some small RCTs, especially in older adults with insomnia. And it seems to increase sleep time efficiency and may raise endogenous melatonin. So that's good. Typical trial amounts, 240 to 400 milliliters juice in the evening. Watch for sugar, so maybe you choose the no added sugar ones and you put it maybe in concentrate, as a concentrate in seltzer and drink it that way. And the other thing they've found out is it can reduce exercise, induce soreness. So if you're exercising, you have a little soreness, that might help in recovery. It also lowers markers of oxidative stress and inflammation. There we go, inflammation again. Kiwi fruit, that's a new one. I mean, kiwi fruit, for all practical purposes, is a super food. It has amazing qualities. They did a pilot study, and they they gave 2 kiwis before bed, and I think it was, interestingly enough, 2 men and 55 women. Where were the men? And it improved total sleep time. It's easy. It's a relatively low calorie, obviously. And it's nutrient dense. And it actually fits the GLP-1 lifestyle. And we could get into that. So kiwi fruit, you've heard of the theory that, when Thanksgiving comes around, we have a lot of turkey. Turkey makes us sleep because it has tryptophan. I don't know about that, but tryptophan is contained in kiwi fruit, and it's an amino acid. And it's actually the building block of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, right? That plays an important role in sleep regulation. And it's really a biochemical precursor to melatonin. Okay, here it is, the hormone that helps regulate our circadian rhythms and promotes sleep onset. Again, they had this pilot study, and that seems to be something that might be something I will try and let you know what happens. All right, here's one more. And this is something that I found interesting, and it's something that I've actually experienced, even though I didn't know I was experiencing. I love Greek yogurt. Spoiler alert, I'm of Greek descent, so maybe that has something to do with it. But you're right. So protein-rich evening snacks. This says is needed. Well, is needed. Warm milk or casein-rich Greek yogurt can support satiety, overnight amino acid supply, but avoid large meals close to bedtime. So this might be it's a snack, right? So we're talking what? We're talking maybe half a cup of some Greek yogurt, maybe low fat, even though higher fat is okay. You probably don't find more than 5 or 6% fat in these yogurts. And you compare it with maybe a little bit of fiber, some berries, some blueberries would be good. And that's the reason for that is because, well, casein is slow digesting milk product, right? Milk protein. And it also contains tryptophan. Here we go again. So I'm kind of starting to geek out a little bit here. But anyhow, other sources for casein protein is low-fat cottage cheese, right? So that's another source. Okay, so here is the medical disclaimer, especially if you're on any other meds. I'm on a few. I've checked to make sure I don't have any contraindications, but I don't know what you're on. So there could be some contraindications. So you need to review all these things with your medical provider. Review melatonin, review magnesium with your clinician or your pharmacist, especially if you're on anticoagulants or if you're taking sedatives or BP meds or have renal disease. And here's a few things. Avoid valerian, kava, and multiple ingredient sleep blends. No bueno. Just these are the simple things, but again, just talk to your clinician because there's variable potency and there can be interactions. All right, so here is finally some GLP-1 specific tips. If nausea disrupts your sleep because of your GLP medication, again, earlier dinners, maybe you elevate your head a little bit or your head of your bed if you can do that. And confirm dosing timing with your prescriber. Maybe again, as I mentioned, you might want to take it a little earlier. And if you have persistent snoring, and by the way, this little watch here can tell you if you're snoring too. So there's benefits to having a smartwatch. So if you witness apneas or your wife tells you that you're shaking the bed in the middle of the night, or you're gasping, or you have morning headaches, again, these are things you might have to be evaluated through a sleep study for obstructive sleep apnea, which I was. All right, so again, well, this brings us to a close of this video. And like I said, if you're on a GLP-1 journey like myself, sleep is one area that we need to conquer. If we're not only to see weight loss, but loss does not include excessive lean mass or muscle. So we can achieve the goal of this whole journey, which is not just looking at the scale and seeing what it says, but a better, healthy new self. Again, it's not about quantity, that is less weight, but about a quality of life. And so I hope all this has been helpful to you, and I will see you next week. And I wonder what that topic will be next week. Well, we shall see. We'll see what that will be. And until then, wishing you a great week and be at peace. Ta-da.